We want things that make us feel good. In all my research, and I've researched 300 to 500 different articles. There is no documentation that says caffeine is good for you. I watched a major influencer. He sells coffee on the internet. No names, no product. Okay. He made this outlandish statement that if you drink 3 to 5 cups of coffee a day, you're going to live longer. Doc, you get Americans get 67% of their antioxidants from coffee. And so I did a deep dive, and I went into the first one, and I found 2 meta studies. One was 500,000 people. Another one was 1 million people. And the meta-analysis, now these are not randomly controlled trials. These are causation and observation studies. But what they found is that people that drank that much coffee actually had a little bit more life expectancy, and they were a little bit healthier. With this caveat, which they don't really, it's not in the fine print, because I read the fine print, is that those studies, half of the people doing it were drinking caffeinated coffee and half were drinking decaf. You realize caffeine had nothing to do with this.
Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh of Inner Skilled, and today I have Steve Frazier with me. Steve, what's going on?
Well, hi, Josh. There's a lot going on. We have a kind of a crisis in our world today, and I'm here to talk about it. And you know, it's people don't see this as a crisis because of something called cognitive dissonance. Okay, and I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Big one. Yeah.
I'm going to explain it briefly, so if your listeners aren't familiar.
Sure. But before we get to that, Steve, if you don't mind, let me just, I usually just say, who is Steve Frazier? What kind of work does he do? So people that aren't familiar with you and your work and where you come from, people connect more traditionally with a quick, and you can keep it brief as you want to, however
Sure.
you want to do it. Yeah.
I am and have been a serial entrepreneur for 40 years. And as a result, I've done a lot of things, a lot of life experiences. I have found as I age, I'm 68 and I'm very healthy, so I intend on doing this for at least another 15 years. I have found that there are just certain things you don't get until you're older. Okay. Sometimes life's got to hit you up alongside the head. Okay. And then sometimes life treats you very, very gently as well. Those are also things to take home. And so through those 40 years, I've had a lot of different experiences. I was in the restaurant business. My wife and I own 6 different restaurants over 23 years. So dealt with a lot of different people, a lot of different personalities, a lot of different addictions. And, my wife got sick 13 years ago, chronically. It took 2 years to figure out. Our daughter finally figured out that she had Lyme disease. 17 doctors decided that they didn't want anything to do with her, so they just told her to leave. And so we went into the natural health rabbit hole, which is really a good rabbit hole. If you're going to go on a rabbit hole, that's not a bad one to go into because, unfortunately, it took her getting extremely ill. She was almost dead when my daughter got a hold of her. And she would have died without my daughter. And it is what it is. And God, but that's another conversation. Okay. And it's all natural. It's all supplements. And so as a result of that rabbit hole, we've dealt with a lot of different issues. And then several years ago, I became a self-sabotage coach and realized that there's a pillar in self-sabotage, and it's the physical pillar, and it deals with all the ways that you physically self-sabotage. And we all do this. Okay. We all have tools in our tool shed. So, don't feel bad. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm not shaming anybody. And I don't judge because I'm not against anything. I'm pro-health and pro-knowledge. And so when I got into that physical pillar, the usual suspects are there: nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, drugs, prescription drugs, overeating, lack of sleep, and a couple other ones. As I looked at these, I thought, caffeine seems to be a pretty big deal. So as I started to research it, I found that in the United States alone, 85% of people drink caffeine every day. And probably 99.8% of them have no idea what caffeine actually does to their bodies. And so as I researched and have looked at hundreds of studies, Many are peer reviewed, many are randomly controlled trials. I found that caffeine has a very big impact on people's lives, on their health, and they don't know it. And that is the key. Is my message today and every day I do this, is do you know someone that might be affected health-wise by caffeine? And so it's not a message of being against caffeine. It has short-term uses. There's no question. We'll get into that shortly, but it gives you a buzz, gives you dopamine, gives you adrenaline, gives you cortisol. Okay, so short-term, this is great. If you do this all day, every day, it's very bad for you because your system is going to say at some point, rebel. So when I became the self-sabotage coach and I looked at the caffeine and I thought, this is going to be my mission. My mission is to spread information and let people decide for themselves. Okay, because I learned something, and from my wife, she has got a lot of wise sayings, and one of them is we all have free will and free won't. And I know that I can't make you or anyone else do anything. And so I have and I have no desire to, okay, because all you're going to do is get resentment and pushback. So what I try to do is I talk about caffeine in a very compassionate way. I have been in the past, a chronic caffeine user, for those 23 years in the restaurant business. And then for another 8 years after that, I lived on caffeine. And then oftentimes I would have a drink of alcohol at night to go to sleep because my circadian rhythm was messed up because I had too much caffeine. I quit when I had a health scare. I thought I was having a heart attack, went to the ER. They put me on an EKG. I'm having premature ventricular contractions. They're called PVCs. And I said to the doctor, we're watching the EKG machine go up and down as these are pumping out of my chest, And he said, you're going to be fine. You're just very sensitive to this. I said, so what causes this? He said, well, stress. And then he paused and he smiled a little bit and he said, and caffeine. And so, and that morning I had been traveling. I day on the road. So I quit. Every good thought I control. And fast forward to 2 years ago, I finally figured out that it was affecting my sleep and my life. I was really dependent on caffeine in the morning.
Yeah. So there seems to be a little lag. I got most everything. There was only a few parts that dropped out.
Okay.
So it seems to be okay now. It seems to be back more in sync. So there's quite a few things here. I've never worked in. Well, let me just say a quick background where I'm coming from. I used to work for entrepreneurs myself, and we had a company drinking culture. So for me, it used to be more alcohol, going out partying, and then people blacking out and me telling them what they used to do. So it was a little bit more severe in that sense, and I wouldn't get hungover. So that was that was even more dangerous because usually that's you're saying it's stop, it's dangerous. Right. I don't want to do this again. Yeah. But actually, after I hit rock bottom and then come into meditation, it got to be so much more gradual where eventually I was getting hungover from one beer. So I'm like, what's the point? I used to be able to go out and drink all night. So now I'm just feeling so much better that I don't even need to do it. So I haven't drank since 2013.
Wow.
So I have a daily meditation practice. I appreciate that. Yeah. And I haven't worked in the restaurant business, but where you're coming from what I've heard, it's kind of a not so well kept secret that there's a lot of drugs and stuff coming in and out of restaurants. Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't want to implicate anybody with owners or get anybody in trouble, but it is pretty well known. I mean, my guess is, you're getting pleasure of food, but there's all other kinds of pleasures coming in, going in and out of there. So I don't know.
Many of my employees smoked, drank, some obviously did drugs.
Sure.
But
yeah, I hear it's really common.
It's just
it's just part of it. It
Yeah,
seems like,
right.
yeah, in America, or elsewhere too. And so, then I know this serial entrepreneur because my brother, he's a 24/7. They say you either work 9 to 5 or you work 24/7 for yourself. And there's just like, yeah. So I understand the archetype of just doing, and I have to do this. I have these
You froze.
obligations, these commitments. So how am I going to do this? Well,
Last thing I heard
caffeine
was your
seems one
brother.
way to do it, right? And then the other thing I will just, oh, I was just saying he's a serial entrepreneur too, or not serial entrepreneur, but he
Okay.
is an entrepreneur. So he's working quite a
Yes.
bit. The people I hung around with years ago, they have all these obligations and commitments. So it makes sense that if they have to fulfill them, and the quick, easy way would be caffeine for a lot of people.
Yes.
So I kind of understand in some sense where it's coming from. For me right now, I have like 1 cup of coffee a day.
Hmm.
Um, on when the weather's really bad, I might have 2, but I do drink green tea and with the meditator. So from what I understand, has a small amount, way less amounts of caffeine than like black tea or coffee. So yeah, I'll just so you know where you can speak to me or how to speak or whatever in the audience. I'm sure it varies gratefully whoever's listening to this.
Well,
Yeah,
95% of my podcast hosts are usually drinking coffee or tea while I talk to them. So, uh, I'm not here again to judge, to shame. It's
I
your
do
body,
have some green tea here.
and
Yeah, sure.
once you hear just a couple things, see, I have a cup of coffee in my hand, except mine is organic, Swiss water processed decaf. Okay, which takes out 99% of the caffeine, keeps all the good stuff in there, and there are some good things in coffee, but regular decaf still has 10 to 15% caffeine, and they take the caffeine out with chemicals which stay in the decaf. Be aware of that. Particularly if you're sensitive to caffeine and you're drinking decaf, you're still getting caffeine. If you're drinking 5 cups a day, that's like a full cup of coffee or more, of regular coffee. So it's just I could do fun facts to know and tell for a couple hours. So but that one's
Sure.
important for people because they think they're
I didn't
drinking
know that.
decaf and they're actually getting caffeine. Now, what I'm drinking doesn't, it's got maybe a milligram or two in a cup, and I drink 1 cup a day. Okay, well, my liver's taking care of this. Okay, it's processing this, and I'm not getting a buzz. I'm not getting the adrenaline hit because what happens is when you drink caffeine, and particularly first thing in the morning, it kicks off some things that aren't good for you. And so, because one thing, when you wake up in the morning, your natural body response is to shoot cortisol into your body. It's a stress hormone. And what it does is it gives you energy for the day. And as your day as you go through your day, the cortisol goes down and melatonin and adenosine come up. Now, many people have heard of melatonin, but not a lot of people have heard about adenosine. And adenosine is the key to you sleeping at night. What it does is it literally, adenosine goes into these receptors in your brain and it puts you to sleep. And that's your circadian rhythm. And that's a natural thing. And caffeine actually disrupts that. And now, as you mentioned, if you have 1 cup in the morning, there's a fairly good chance that it's not going to affect you because the half-life of caffeine is 5 to 8 hours. And so if you have caffeine first thing in the morning, your half-life, and then your half-life, if you have 150 milligrams, you're down to possibly 20 or 30 milligrams when you go to bed. Okay. People that drink caffeine sleep. So don't misunderstand me. There's a lot of things that I say that people say, well, that doesn't happen to me, so that can't be true. Well, each one of us processes differently. Okay, so you and I can drink the same cup of coffee, and one of us will get a buzz and one of us won't. Okay, all depends on how we metabolize. There's fast metabolizers, slow metabolizers. And so, what are the impacts then? So we have our natural circadian rhythm. So when you drink, if you get up, first thing you should do, and I'm just being honest, whether you drink caffeine or not, is drink a cup of lemon water, a glass of lemon water, 20 ounces. because it rehydrates you. Okay, because you dehydrate overnight. And the lemon water, I drink warm lemon water. I put other stuff in mine, but that's key. So I'm rehydrated. Now, if you do that and you're a caffeine drinker, just wait another hour and then have your first cup of coffee. So what's going to happen is your natural cortisol is going to be better, and you're going to be rehydrated, because caffeine is a diuretic. And if you don't know what that is, that makes you go to the bathroom. And when you do that, when you pee, you don't just pee water. You pee minerals, particularly calcium and magnesium. And if you don't supplement these out, and I'm not giving medical advice here, but if you're doing this and you're not supplementing calcium and magnesium, you need to talk to a natural health practitioner, and you need to do something, And a lot of people take magnesium glycinate at night just to help them sleep, because that does help you go to sleep, but also then gets the magnesium back in your body, particularly older women. They're in postmenopause. Their bones are already starting to go. And if they're losing calcium and magnesium through caffeine, it just makes it worse. So
that was huge for me.
Was it?
Yeah. So I had noticed the really good health benefits when I was doing lemon water in the morning, and it's a good thing in general too, to do other times, I think, as well.
Right.
Yeah. And then the magnesium, I noticed a huge benefit when I was taking topical, and I still do sometimes. Magnesium, it kind of relaxes the muscles, so that I didn't know the dehydration and the other chemical. Thank you for mentioning that. I hadn't heard of that one, that it does. And yeah, I am fairly sensitive to caffeine, I can't drink it, probably definitely in the late afternoon to early evening. Otherwise, I'll have trouble falling asleep, So I'm fairly sensitive, not as much as I could be if I just drank, I think, a couple cups of green tea a day instead of a cup of coffee. The other thing I was curious about here is I have heard the regular decaffeinated coffee that tons of chemicals. I also heard there's a byproduct of a sugar cane. Is that the process you're talking about for decaffeination?
No.
Are you familiar with that one too, and how that differs from the Swiss water one?
No,
okay, because I've heard of that, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, the Swiss water press, yes, just uses water. And so, and I'm going to give you a number of links that you can put in the show notes. And one of those has a link to a three-page white paper on Swiss water process. Okay, another one is tools and trackers. And then there's other articles on caffeine. And there's also, ironically, a website link that tells you how much caffeine is in basically every beverage sold in the United States and Canada. I mean, it goes down to the Starbucks different sizes. Okay. So, just realize that the resources are going to be with you, for you and your listeners. And then, the key to realizing if you have an issue is, how much are you actually drinking? And if you don't know how much you're drinking, you can't really have a plan, because if you want to quit caffeine, you have to have a plan, because you don't just casually quit caffeine, because it is a psychoactive stimulant. It's a legal drug, and it's socially accepted and socially promoted. Okay. So, I did a podcast last month, and we were talking about this, and I said to the host, I used the analogy of a salmon swimming upstream. That's me. I'm the salmon swimming upstream, because I'm fighting a coffee culture, right? And he kind of chuckled, and he said, "No, Steve, you're a salmon swimming against a tsunami." Okay. And I think it's a better analogy. I have talked to friends and family about this, and the first thing they say to me is, "You can't take my coffee from me." And I said, first, I have no desire to do that. And second of all, I can't do that, because you control what you do. So when you drink that caffeine first thing in the morning, your cortisol goes up, your dopamine goes up. And if you're familiar with dopamine, it's a great hormone. Okay. It makes you feel good. Okay. Now, this just doesn't happen when you drink it first thing in the morning. Every time you drink caffeine, it spikes cortisol, it spikes dopamine and adrenaline. And adrenaline is in our bodies. It's a wonderful thing. It comes from the adrenal gland. because what it does is it puts you in fight or flight, which is a stress hormone, and that will protect you and save you if you're going to get in a fight or you need to run away from a lion or tiger or bear, right? However, if you are putting yourself into fight or flight and you're not fighting or flighting, what happens? Well, your adrenal gland at some point gets a little ticked off at you, and it also shoots glucose into your muscles. Okay. Now, this is why a lot of pre-workout drinks have a lot of caffeine, because it shoots glucose, it shoots a lot of adrenaline, then they're all pumped up, and it helps at that point. It does produce testosterone when you're using your muscles. However, and for all your guys and even women that have guys in their lives, cortisol and testosterone are not good friends. The more cortisol you have in your body, the less testosterone you're going to have. Okay. What does that do? Well, it lowers your libido, it fractures your sperm, and if you're trying to conceive, it's going to be harder. Not impossible by any means, because we both know that people that drink caffeine have babies every day. Okay, so I'm not making an outlandish statement. However, realize that every time you drink caffeine, that cycle happens. And then it plugs, the caffeine molecule is very similar to the adenosine molecule. And what caffeine does is the caffeine molecule goes into your brain and plugs the adenosine receptor. And that's what gives you that feeling of alertness, because adenosine is what puts you to sleep at night. And so once that circadian rhythm is disrupted, you do sleep. People that drink caffeine, even chronic users, sleep. But their sleep is not good, because you have, and I'm going to briefly touch on there's 4 stages of sleep. The first stage is 5% of the cycle. It's where you're just slowly lulling into semi-conscious and unconscious, right? The second is the biggest one, and that's 40% of the stage. And you're doing possibly a little dreaming. You might have a little brain activity, but you're just there. Stage 3 and 4 are the big ones, because in stage 3 is where you heal. Okay, men produce testosterone, women produce estrogen. Your body repairs the cells in your muscles, okay? And once your circadian rhythm is off, stage 3 is delayed and shortened. And then you get to stage 4, and that's REM sleep, rapid eye movement, okay? And what that does is that's where you dream, and that's also where your subconscious is repairing your brain and repairing some other things up there. Now, one of the things I found is that those 4 stages happen 4 to 6 times a night. Okay, so it's not just once. So if every stage 3 and stage 4 is shortened, what happens when you wake up? You're tired because you didn't get that deep, restful sleep. I've done a number of anecdotal stories, and for people that have quit caffeine, and 95% of the stories that I've read, their sleep has improved so dramatically that they can't believe how well they're sleeping. They can't in their memory remember how well they slept. And so what happens, they wake up in the morning and they have energy. I wake up in the morning and I do my best work in the morning. I do. And I still have energy at night, but because my natural cortisol, and I look at the sun, and now because it's dark in the morning when I get up, I use a sun lamp. Okay, but what that does is that helps you naturally boost your cortisol. So how does it affect women? Well, it affects women more because of hormones. Okay, there's a lot more hormonal stuff going on, and it's coming from the adrenals, and whether you and I might not want to admit this, but caffeine causes anxiety and nervousness. Okay, now men aren't supposed to talk about this, but real men do, because it's a real thing. And if you hide it, it's only going to come back and bite you. Okay, because you have to, you understand, you have to address issues when they come up. Okay, so women who are already anxious and nervous, now they throw some caffeine in the mix, their circadian rhythm's messed up. And I'm going to touch briefly on the menstrual cycle, because it's a big deal for women, because there's a phase in a menstrual cycle. It's a 28-day cycle. The luteal phase is from 14 to 28 days. And this is where you're ovulating and you can get pregnant and then you have your period. Well, in those 14 days, because of the rise in estrogen in your body, you process caffeine 70% slower. So the half-life goes from 5 to 8 to 8 to 12. And so a woman in that phase of her cycle drinks a 150 milligram cup of coffee at noon and doesn't have any caffeine after that. She still probably has 75 milligrams active at 10 o'clock when she's going to go to bed. Now, she's going to go to sleep. What's it going to do? It's going to mess with her sleep cycle, right? Now, my mission here in everything I do is to give knowledge for people that may have a health issue associated with caffeine. And perhaps someone, and maybe you do, and maybe one of your listeners does. Please share this with them. Now, that's my general mission. I do have a micro mission because I touched on this briefly, and that is we all have free will and free won't. So we control what goes in our bodies. Now, there's one person that doesn't, and that's this person right here. This is a fetus, and fetus is completely dependent on mom. Everything that mom eats and drinks goes right to the fetus. And when it comes to caffeine, it's dramatic because there's an enzyme in our livers as adults. It's called the CPY1A2. There's no quiz on that, okay? But that processes 95% of the caffeine that we put in our bodies. Babies don't develop that enzyme until they're 3 to 6 months old. So all the caffeine that goes into their bodies stays in their bodies. And if mom's drinking caffeine every day, caffeine never leaves the baby's body, the fetus's body. Okay, so what happens? Baby's born, and 12 hours after it's born, the adenosine receptors open up, and baby is screaming bloody murder because it's got a headache. And the common response is, oh, that's normal. That's colicky. Your baby, this is normal. Okay. Well, when you get a baby and they know that the mom is addicted to a certain drug, they know that they have to deal with the baby in a different way. How many people realize that caffeine is the same thing, right? But then what else does caffeine do to the fetus? Okay, and here's the things. And through many studies that I've researched, this is not my opinion, okay? So I want to make that clear. I am a subject matter expert here, okay? I'm not being arrogant. I've just put in hundreds of hours of research. And the bottom line is caffeine can lead to these things. It can lead to low birth weight. It can lead to miscarriages. It can lead to stillbirth. It can lead to ADD, ADHD after the baby's born. It can lead to different development issues because the baby doesn't develop the same way when it has caffeine in its system for 9 months. And so my message is to ask, if you know a pregnant woman that's drinking caffeine, please share these facts with her, because many people just don't know this, and it's not their fault. And I'm not making excuses for them. They just don't know because Socrates said this thing, you don't know what you don't know. Okay. There's so many things we don't know that it will make your head explode. It really will. And so, there's other things that caffeine does. We could get into, again, we could do this for hours. We're not going to. Again, my mission is to spread knowledge. Men often have higher blood pressure when they drink caffeine regularly because the adrenaline is, when your adrenaline hits, your heart beats faster. Okay. And we talked about libido. We talked about the sperm. And actually couples that are trying to conceive, if they're both drinking caffeine, realize that the sperm could be fractured, the egg's getting less blood flow in the uterus, and it could lead to an inability to conceive. So I'm just saying, throwing it out there, that if you are in that position or somebody that is, say, just try quitting caffeine and see what happens. What's the worst thing that can happen? You have a baby, right? I mean,
Yeah, this is
because you're already trying. And so,
yeah, I'll jump in here real quick, and I don't have kids, none that I know of, and but it just seems and I haven't looked into this, and I appreciate all the knowledge around this too. There's so much that goes into this, like you said. Well, it just makes sense to me because there's so many products that have warning labels on them specifically for being pregnant. So it makes sense that
Yes.
during that time, there's going to be a lot of different things. I mean, we can see that just by picking up lots of different products and seeing warnings on them. And we know the kind of strength and the effect that this has. So to me, it just makes sense. I mean, even if you don't, at least it should be a starting point for one's own research to look into this more deeply, just because of
Yes.
all the
Right.
different things that could go wrong during a pregnancy, all the different warning labels. So I'll just put that
Yep.
out there.
Right.
I want to ask too a little bit about health benefits of coffee, because I see all these different studies. One is on one side, the other one, oh no, there's good things. So, but before we get into that, I just want to say how where I can relate more to is the psychology part of it. Now, you talked about like even lifestyle and culture. So that's a huge topic on its own.
Yes.
But maybe I'll come back to that in a second. But I also want to say the
So
nature of addiction is a
first of
huge
all,
thing
I'll
too,
hit the health
and
thing
it's different
because
with different
it's
substances. I know with when I smoke cigarette. Okay, sure, that's enough to go. But the nature of addiction
yes.
is a big thing too. Like cigarettes, when I used to smoke cigarettes years ago, there was no more pleasure left from the cigarette. It was just to get rid of this gnawing like nervousness, or my nerves were just like on this state of like, and it was just to get rid of that. It was no longer even pleasurable. So once I quit that, for me though, green tea, it has a low amount of caffeine, but there's other things in it that also have a calming effect too. And I'll know just from my own experience with coffee, I can't drink that much of it because I will start getting, my nervous system will get overstimulated and overactivated, and it's very, very unpleasant. And there's
Yes.
no benefit. It feels really bad for me. So that's why I can only really drink one cup. Otherwise, very rarely will I get shakes, but I know a lot of people that do that. That's so unpleasant for me. I will just like, I'll either stop right there and then maybe even to the next day not do it. But I'm pretty fairly energetically sensitive, and I can monitor the nervous system effects that I have and know where that threshold is. And like I said, the stop, because usually you do it for some kind of benefit, but when it gets to that point, there's no benefit. Plus, it sucks,
Right.
So not
Well,
everybody has that feedback, though. So yeah, there's
no.
plenty of stuff here for
You
you to address
chronic
that I threw out here.
right. Yep. Chronic caffeine users aren't getting a high anymore. They're only drinking caffeine to get to a baseline. Okay. I mean, what you just said, you were having a cigarette just to get that craving away. And that's what chronic caffeine users are doing exactly the same thing. Okay. Because there's this vicious cycle of you get high, you come down. And what do? You got to have more caffeine. Okay. Because your adenosine receptors open up. Your body's used to this dopamine hit. It likes it. So it wants more. Okay. Let's face it. We want things that make us feel good. Right. And so in all my research, and I've researched 300 to 500 different articles. Okay. There is no documentation that says caffeine is good for you. Keyword there, caffeine. Now, so I watched a major influencer. He sells coffee on the internet. No names, no product. Okay. He did a reel last week, and my wife sent it to me. And he made this outlandish statement that if you drink 3 to 5 cups of coffee a day, you're going to live longer. It's proven. And that you get Americans get 67% of their antioxidants from coffee. And so I did a deep dive, and I went into the first one. Okay, the first one, and I found 2 meta studies. One was 500,000 people, another one was 1 million people. And they both, and the meta-analysis, now these are not randomly controlled trials, these are causation and observation studies. Okay, but what they found is that people that drank that much coffee actually had a little bit more life expectancy, and they were a little bit healthier, with this caveat. which they don't really, it's not in the fine print, because I read the fine print, is that those studies, half of the people doing it were drinking caffeinated coffee and half were drinking decaf. You realize caffeine had nothing to do with this. It was this, and you mentioned this, okay? So I'll give you kudos for that. There is stuff in coffee and tea that is good for you, okay? So when I drink my organic Swiss water process, I'm getting the polyphenols and things like that, okay? But I'm not getting the caffeine, because caffeine is a pesticide. It's a natural pesticide. It's bitter. There's no reason to have this in anything other than coffee, because it's natural there. Okay. I mean, if you look at soda and energy drinks, they take the caffeine that the coffee companies take out of the coffee beans and then they put it in their product to make people addicted to it. Okay. I mean, that is a fact. That's what happens to it. They don't throw it down the toilet. They use it. They sell it and they use it so they can increase their product. Okay. And so there are some things, there's some benefits. You do get a quick high, but the culture that we live in is hard. And quitting caffeine, as in quitting anything. If you drink alcohol and you're an alcoholic and you've been going to the bar and you decide you're going to quit, and you go to the bar and you have an NA beer or a tonic water, you're gonna face some serious backlash. And this goes to my self-sabotage background, is that you are no longer part of the herd. And the herd doesn't like it when somebody leaves the herd. They don't like that person, okay? And so, as an example, when you are at work and you have coffee breaks, and everybody sees you are going to have a decaf. I had breakfast with a friend a couple months ago, a good friend. Waitress comes up, "Would you like a cup of coffee?" He says, "Sure, I'll have one." And I said, "I'll have decaf." And he slams his hands down on the table and he looks at me and he said, "Decaf?" And he just like that, "Decaf?" And I said, "Well, yeah, caffeine doesn't agree with me." And about 5 minutes later, I looked at him and I said, "I just want to bring something up here." I said, 8 or 9 out of 10 people that you'd have said that to would have had regular coffee. Peer pressure, social peer pressure. Okay. And I mean, I didn't say anything back to him. I just said, "Look, I don't do this." Right. And if you don't like it, basically, if you don't like it, leave the table. Right. Okay. Well, he didn't, because we're friends and he understood. However, how many people actually will deal with you on that level, on a compassionate level, right? Because that herd mentality is real in our society. And when you leave the herd, you're the outcast. It's like one of my favorite memes is all the sheep running off the cliff. Okay, and they're just following the sheep in front of them. And there's a little bubble cloud that says the one sheep is looking back and say, "Why are we following Sarah off this cliff?" And somebody else behind him says, "Because everybody else is." Okay. And so, we get a lot of cognitive dissonance here when it comes to caffeine, as in many things in our culture. Okay. And that is, when we have new information presented to us that goes against everything that we've known and believed, we have to say to ourselves, realistically, have I been brainwashed or programmed? Or is this stuff actually something I should consider? And I did a podcast yesterday with a guy in England, and he had one of the best statements I've ever heard about this particular thing. He said, "It is so hard to research things that you don't want to know." Wow. Talk about profound, right? I mean, this guy was only 46 years old, and he had more nuggets of wisdom in that hour and a half I spent with him than I had in 30 podcasts before. Because I mean, that's an interesting thing, because how many people can actually go and say, "Okay, I don't believe this, but I need to learn more about it because I could be wrong." That's called humility, which is a virtue. And if you ever want to deal with self-sabotage, you got to have some humility, because you got to admit that you maybe haven't been making the right decisions. So, I will leave you with this, and it's one of my wife Brenda's.
And that's why I wanted to do this podcast. That's why I wanted to do this podcast too, is because, I said, well, what's my cup of coffee? There's no harm in that. And so I saw my defensive nature and I thought, okay, well, something's there. that I need to look at. And so that's why I invited you on to begin with. Same way, like Zen practice. I don't
Right.
want to do all
And I
these silly
appreciate that. Yeah.
forms, Yeah. I don't want to do all these silly forms. So it's like, well, why are you so averse to it? You need to go check this out. So yeah, so that's it's a really good point. Yeah, and then the friendship. You just illustrated beautifully how friendship is so important, because then we kind of really know who our true friends are. If they, in that sense of belonging is really so important. I remember when I was had quit, and I was still went to like a cocktail party with people I used to work with, and I didn't have any. My mistake was I didn't even have like a tonic water. So I was doing nothing. And so I got all these different comments, and even these ones, oh, what are you trying to make me look bad, or things like
Yeah.
this.
It's
And
tough.
I will find that some old people that I used to hang around fall away, and then I come back, and then we'll get new
Right.
friends too. And the friends are so super supportive as well. Yeah. And I'll go in and maybe illustrate. I'll let you finish where you were at. I was, and I can illustrate like the sophistication of this too, that goes beyond just that, and in the coffee world now. But yeah, please continue where you were at.
So what my mission is this, and that is, there's this old saying, it's you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. However, you can make it thirsty. And my role here is to make people acknowledge and be thirsty for information. So if you know someone that has some of these things going on, and caffeine could be a mitigating factor, particularly in health, conception, baby, whatever, please share it with them. Okay. You yourself and anybody that's listening. And I will end with this, because as I've said to you a couple times, if you know someone, perhaps that someone is you. And can you look in the mirror? Okay. Mirror work is wonderful. I mean, when we deal with self-sabotage, and I know that you do a lot of meditating and things like that. Mirror work is incredible, because when you look yourself in the eye and say, I have I have a bunch of stuff on my bathroom mirror, but one of them is in big letters, I am enough. Okay. I see it every time I go in there, every morning, every night, during the day. What does it do? It reinforces my subconscious. It says, no matter what you're doing, because especially in the environment I'm in right now, I have a lot of pushback. Now, there's a lot of people that want to know, okay, but baby steps. We've got to take this slow. Again, I have no desire to even tell you to quit, okay? But if you look at deeper into some, and I'm going to send you some resources, that you can look at, and your listeners can look at, and you can put in your show notes. This is free will and free won't, baby. Okay. I do what I do. I'm 68 years old. I'm on no meds. I feel really good. I have a lot of energy. Okay. Why? Because I take care of myself. Now, a lot of that had to do with my wife. When she got sick, we had to eat healthy. Okay. And when I say that, organic and non-GMO, fresh, no processed foods. Okay. And this is hard work, Josh. Okay. So anybody that thinks they're just going to be healthy, it just doesn't work like that.
Especially in America. It's
Oh,
easier in Europe.
yeah,
When I
you're
lived in
right.
Europe, way easier in Europe.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely worth it. I'm a huge non-GMO, and organic
Yeah.
proponent. Absolutely.
Right. And so, you look at all these different factors and you say to yourself, can I do this? You can do anything. There is no, if you have the passion and the desire. I mean, there's exception. Rarely, you can quit caffeine, you can quit alcohol, you can quit drugs. I've done a number of podcasts with recovered alcoholics and drug addicts, and we talk about it, because there's similarity. Okay, they're not the same exactly. Physically quitting caffeine is fairly easy, especially if you taper. But staying off of it, and that social pressure, and that's like, what do you do when you've normally had that energy drink in the middle of the afternoon? If you don't have a plan, you're going to have that energy drink. Okay, you just are. You can't stop it. And so you have to have a plan. So, one of the things we talk about breath work, we talk about meditation, we talk about affirmations. We do hypnotherapy is a good thing to reprogram your subconscious, right? And you can do that through affirmations and meditation. You can. I mean, I've done, I don't think I'm at your level, but I've done enough research to know that we can reprogram our subconscious mind and if you can do that, your life is going to be better.
Absolutely. I think another thing here worth mentioning is like the ritual that comes around with some people in their morning coffee routine. You have a really good replacement for that. You know, I also wanted to mention here what's called the high end coffee world, and I've talked about this to some of my friends. But I just want to mention that now you
Yes.
can go into certain high end
Yeah.
cafes and they will do, you know, a pour over, and then there's huge amounts of like marketing material and really highly conscious companies that will go to the coffee plantations themselves in Europe. They will overpay the coffee in order to get the people to do it. You know, they'll weigh out the bean by the gram. They will select the grind, and then they will have different pour over systems and the water temperature just right in the first bloom. You know, and it gets down to a science, and then the right amount. And that's not to say everything that goes into the roasting process now after the first crack. And so see, I mean, all this stuff, I mean, I recognize that I've turned into like a coffee snob, even though I don't feel I know enough about it. So like there's a culture and a lifestyle and kind of an artesian aspect to it, you know, and a worldly aspect, and a sense of like sophistication and culture. When it comes to this niche, you know, and Europe hasn't even caught on to this yet. They're just their espresso drinks, right? And I just kind of blow those off. No, I'm not having Americano because just give me, if I have to do that, I will just have an espresso and a cup of water. You know, but so there's all these ideas and rituals, habits, and ideas and opinions. So yeah, it's not really that easy. And I've hung around people, drug people in the past, and part of it is just this anticipation of scoring the drugs, not so much as doing the drugs, you know, in the whole culture. And then there's the habitual part of it too, right? And substituting healthy habits. There's titration, but there's also substituting healthy habits for the old habits. And yeah, and like you mentioned, the kindness aspect of our hearts too, and the belonging. So it's a really multifaceted, almost multidimensional thing we're talking about. There's so many different causes and conditions that come in here, and you've mentioned quite a bit. But I'll let you address a few of these here before maybe we start wrapping up. Then,
Well, you need to have a plan. And, you know, as an entrepreneur, if you have a good plan, you generally can have a really good chance of succeeding. It's the same with quitting caffeine or anything else. And so, you know, one of the resources I'm giving you is you have trackers, you've got journals. It talks about, you know, how do you feel when you wake up? How do you feel when you go to bed? You know, if you are getting off of caffeine, you know, why are you doing it and how are you doing it? You know, my daughter is a natural health practitioner. I talked about her briefly. Okay. She's a chronic caffeine user, and she went to a seminar in New York City a month ago, and a guy tested her and said caffeine is your second highest sensitivity. So she came home, I'm going to quit. She was going to go way down. We realized that she was drinking way more caffeine than she realized. And I saw her 2 nights ago, and she is struggling. She went down to 150 milligrams. She went down to 100, and now she can't go to that next level. She can't make herself do it. I think eventually she will. Okay. And she knows what I'm doing. I mean, I see her. She's got a natural health clinic. She's my caregiver. We talk almost not every day, but, you know, 5 days a week. And we often talk about how she's doing. And a lot of it is that ritual thing. And, you know, last week she woke up one day and she forgot to have her coffee in the morning. And 11:30, she had such a splitting headache. And all of a sudden it occurred to her that she hadn't had her coffee. So she drinks a quick cup of coffee, and 5 minutes later, it's gone because the adenosine receptors are plugged again. Okay. if you have a plan, and you can always reach out to me. I help people get off of caffeine, but there's a lot of resources all over. And quitting caffeine is not about quitting a substance. It's about getting freedom and liberation for your health and your body, because you're no longer tied to something to give you energy. You're going to get that natural energy, and it's amazing. I mean, in the testimonials that I have, and I've looked at hundreds. Okay, they have so much energy now in the morning, and they don't have to have any stimulants. And this is a big deal, because your body now, our bodies are beautifully and wonderfully made until we start screwing with them. Okay. And, and obviously there's a tool shed it's really big. You got caffeine, you got nicotine, you got alcohol, you got drugs. Okay. And then, the key is having a certain amount of humility to recognize that you may not be doing the right thing for your body. And, I can leave it there, because that is the key. This is not about me. This is about you. And if you or someone is having a negative effect, because realize that cognitive dissonance, doctors and nurses have the same thing. Okay. And they often drink more caffeine than anybody else because they work long hours and they need that energy. So when you go in and you have a symptom of chronic caffeine use, if they don't have that symptom, they will not look at caffeine. I just think about that. And I'm not dissing them. Okay. That it's cognitive dissonance. Okay. If I'm not affected negatively by caffeine, well, that person can't be either. And so as we move forward in this discussion, not now, but in general, when people listen to this, do you need caffeine? Are you addicted to caffeine? I'll tell you what, if you quit for 12 to 24 hours, you're going to know if you have an addiction. Because in that period of time, you're going to get a massive headache, you're going to get brain fog, and you're going to get fatigue if you're addicted to caffeine. If you don't get those symptoms, you probably are not addicted, which means you're not drinking a lot of caffeine. You can drink caffeine semi-regularly and your body just processes it. It's okay. I'm not telling you can't do that. You can. I mean, our bodies, again, are made to take care of this. That enzyme I talked about in the liver, it just gets rid of it. But you do it over and over and over again, and pretty soon your body's not working well. You got pre-diabetes because your insulin spike, your blood sugar spikes all the time, and then your insulin has to spike. And again, your pancreas and your adrenal glands at some point are going to get a little ticked off at you. And
one question that comes to, is there like a universal intake that's safe for most people? I mean, I'm sure we all, I would say there's quite a bit of variation on the metabolism of how we metabolize not only caffeine but all kinds of other substances. Then I'm sure it varies a little bit depending on what things we mix,
because we all metabolize differently.
But the amount of milligrams per day,
right?
Yeah. Yes.
If you're doing more than 200, you're a chronic user. Okay, so if you have 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and that's generally between 100 and 150 milligrams, all depends on how it's brewed and how big your cup is, because 1 cup used to be 8 ounces and now it's 16, right? Or 20. They changed the goalposts. And so, for pregnant women, it's 0, because the fetus is going to hold it. And if you drink caffeine every day as a pregnant mom, the caffeine never leaves the fetus's blood, because it takes 100 hours for a fetus to process it through the blood flow. So if mom quits, the fetus actually has the caffeine for 100 hours, and then it's finally gone. But that's if she doesn't drink any more caffeine. But for you and I, if we do that first thing in the morning and we have that 1 cup, and if you can do it before 10 o'clock, that's the best way, because then that gives that half-life. It's no longer a half-life, now it's a quarter life, right? Because that's how it works. It exponentially decreases. And so you are going to sleep, and you may not have a major sleep disruption if you're just limiting to under 200 milligrams early in the morning. But once you start messing around at noon or afternoon, it's going to disrupt your sleep. So is that safe? Well, you are going to sleep. You're just going to be tired when you wake up. So, you in all my research, I've looked at a number of different studies. Many of them are influenced by the industry. And so, my personal advice is if you can do 100 or less, you're going to be just fine. 200 or less, you're going to be okay, with air quotes, because I can't, 200 milligrams is a lot. Okay. And it's going to disrupt some things in your body. And again, is it safe? Is it good for you? No. Caffeine is not good for you. Okay. The coffee could be, and the tea could be. So if you can, there's things in, like your green tea, it doesn't have a lot of caffeine in it. So you're pretty good there. Okay. But you start drinking, different kinds, and there's caffeine in everything, and one of the most blatant abuses is in PMS medications. Okay. People that have very, very bad menstrual cramps or have very, very tough time. In some of the over-the-counter menstrual or PMS medications, there's 30 to 60 milligrams of caffeine in one tablet. Okay. If you drink 2 tablets, it's like having a cup of coffee. Now, what it did is it gave you a temporary relief because of the adrenaline, the cortisol, and the dopamine. What it did is it made your menstrual cramps worse. It made the whole experience worse. And so, I can only tell you this because this is what I've researched. These are the studies. And you have to, each person has to evaluate their own life. I'll leave you with a question. And that is, and this is a theoretical, hypothetical question for you to ask yourself and for everybody else. Do you really know what it's like to be healthy? You can ponder this for hours or days. Okay. And, I'm not telling you I'm the picture of perfect health, but I am healthy. I wake up in the morning. I have energy. 30 years ago, my doctor and I agreed that my left knee would have to be replaced in 10 or 15 years. Well, when I quit gluten and grains 13 years ago and my wife got sick, my knee pain went away. Why? Inflammation. There's no inflammation. You talked about Europe. Well, Europe doesn't allow glyphosate in their food. Okay. My wife can probably go to Italy and have bread off the table and not get sick.
Yep. I quit bread when I got back to
and
the
they don't do
States
any, a lot of
because it's
them
just
don't
not
have
the
any
same
GMOs
thing,
either.
Yep.
And so, again, cultures are different. Yep. Right.
Well, Steve, despite the delay we have here, I think the final product that we have here, so to speak, is going to turn out great due to this platform, and hopefully it's not too distracting for the listeners. I really appreciate all your wisdom and guidance today on these topics and the amount of information, because I don't normally jump into kind of more the medical side of things, so I learned quite a bit today.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm appreciative for it, and like practical guidance too. I mean, some things, there's just certain things for certain types of people that they need to hear, that they don't want to hear, that will be more effective in causing a behavior change or a realization, depending on who one is and what their life circumstances are. So I like this kind of full spectrum approach that you took to this issue. And yeah, I appreciate all of it. So why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to work with you? What kind of, if you have a books, courses, anything you want to plug or draw people's attention to, and then take the listeners out on a final message you'd like to leave everybody with.
Okay. One, I want to thank you for being an excellent host, for contributing. Okay, you did a great job. So how to reach me? Well, I have a website called releasethecoffeecuffs.com, and it's CUFFS, and it's a play on handcuffs. Okay, I wrote a book called Release the Coffee Cuffs: Winning the Battle with Caffeine. That's available on the website. It's also available on Amazon, Kindle, and any major platform. I also have a coaching program in there, and that's for people that want help. And I have a 4-week without personal sessions. I have a 4-week with sessions. I have an 8-week with multiple sessions, and it's all on the website. Okay, there's a lot of information in there as well for you to delve into, and you can contact me there. All you have to do is go to the contact page, send me an email. I will respond. Okay, because part of my mission here is just to help people. Okay, and people, because they don't know. You don't know what you don't know, again. And so that is the way to get a hold of me. That's the way to get the book, to get my resources. There are a number of resources in your show notes that I'm going to send you that you'll have. And I'll leave you with this message, and that is, we need to spread the word on this. And so if you know someone that could be being negatively affected by caffeine, particularly health-wise, but also psychologist and mentally, okay, please share this information with them, okay? Because then they can make an informed decision about their body and how they're going to move forward, okay? Again, we can't make anybody do anything. I have no desire to try to make anybody do anything, because I can't. However, I can take them and make them thirsty.
Well, all right. Very good, Steve. And may we all come to know our most balanced, optimal, natural states of energy. Thank you all for listening, and bye now.